Representative Joseph DioGuardi, 47 years old, second-term Republican from New York. Key challenge in the 100th Congress, accountability in federal spending.
I don't think that the public is getting a dollar's worth of goods and services for a dollar's worth of taxes.
DioGuardi is a trained accountant and says the way to eliminate government waste and mismanagement is to introduce sound accounting principles. To that end, he's pushed legislation to have a chief federal financial officer appointed for 10-year terms. His job would be to manage the money allocated by Congress. DioGuardi insists congressmen think of their voting cards as credit cards for free shopping sprees.
We have today in Congress a credit card mentality. This card, as far as I'm concerned, is the most expensive credit card in the world. This card has no limit. I'm proud of my record, Gabe. I've lived now in Westchester County for 29 years, and I've seen Westchester County grow from a bedroom community to one of the most impressive and economically stable regions in the country. And I'm proud to say that it wasn't a government program that made Westchester County what it is today. It was the people. And that's why I left a career after 22 years in business to run for Congress, to see whether I can continue this as the greatest opportunity society the world has ever seen. And I've delivered for Westchester County. 2 weeks ago, Mayor Noto and I, Mamaroneck, announced $4.3 million for senior citizens housing. Just my very last vote was on H.R. 6. Congressman Ottinger, for 10 years, has been looking to get authorized a massive flood control bill. Guess what? Joe DioGuardi got it.
Next, former Congressman Joseph DioGuardi will take your comments and questions about the federal budget and congressional budgeting process.
After I left Congress, it dawned on me that if I was going to leave any legacy for the 4 years that I was there, it should be a report to the people of the United States of America as to what I saw as a professional CPA, having been trained for 22 years with one of the world's largest accounting firms, to see certain things that the average person, and certainly the average congressman, didn't see and still doesn't see. That we have a system, a budget process, we have a system of accounting, a system of keeping books that is not the system that government imposes on you. In fact, it's the worst system that can be used. And in the book, I make the comparison between the bankruptcy of New York City in 1975 and the theoretical bankruptcy of the United States of America sometime in the future, making the case that the new bankers for the United States of America are not those banks who were buying the municipal bonds of New York City back in '75, but Japan, Germany, Great Britain, who are buying tens of billions of dollars worth of treasury bills and treasury bonds. So we're kind of hooked on foreign capital. The point is that today, let me give you the bottom line, the United States is using a Mickey Mouse accounting system. It's called the cash basis. They use it for the budgeting, they use it for the accounting, they use it for everything. It's a system designed for politicians because you can accelerate income, you can defer expenses. I dare say that if officers of a public corporation used the accounting principles and the accounting systems that the United States uses today, they would be indicted for securities fraud through the Securities and Exchange Commission, and no doubt would be incarcerated.
Joe DioGuardi, let me start with you. You're lobbying the U.S. administration on Kosovo. Where does the issue appear on the list of the U.S. administration's priorities in the first place?
First, let me say that I'm the volunteer president of the Albanian American Civic League, the only registered lobby of the Albanian people here in America, representing the concerns and interests of some 400,000 Albanian Americans, and Kosovo is at the top of our list. I try to go to Washington as much as I can. I was there yesterday to speak in front of the Institute of Peace. There were many people from the State Department there to let them know that our foreign policy is a mess, it's failing, that they have blood on their hands. Mr. Holbrooke has blood on his hands. NATO has already discredited itself. We've been through this before. We saw it in Bosnia. We diddled, waffled, and dawdled for 3 years, saying that nothing could be done, and then finally, we couldn't take the bloodshed anymore after seeing Srebrenica and the Market Square in Sarajevo. We're seeing it right now in Kosovo, and we acted.
In the long hours at Rambouillet, the Kosovar Albanian delegation was asked to put its faith in Western promises, promises of military protection and significant political gains. Madeleine Albright called it the best deal they could hope for. The Albanians agreed in principle, but they didn't sign. Was that a mistake? Joining us now is Joe DioGuardi, a former U.S. congressman, now with the Albanian American Civic League. Why didn't they sign, and what does agreement in principle really amount to, do you think?
Well, they didn't sign for a simple reason, because the agreement as it stands now would be nothing less than a death warrant for the Albanian Kosovars. You have to remember how this began. It began in 1987 when Slobodan Milosevic rose to power by coming to Kosovo on a platform of anti-Albanian racism and Greater Serbia. He occupied Kosovo in 1989, took away all the jobs, all the schools, all the courts, the separate parliament of Kosovo. Everything was removed. The Kosovars have lived in a concentration camp for 10 years. There's been nothing like this since Adolf Hitler created the concentration camps in Germany. They cannot go back. They have declared their independence in a referendum in 1991. The Slovenes did, and they got out. The Croatians did, and they got out. The Bosnians did, and they got out. And by the way, they are all Slavs, just like the Serbs. The Albanians are not Slavs. Why should they be forced to live with people who treat them like untermenschens?
Mr. Voyevich, you said, I believe it was on the op-ed page of UA today, that the agreement that was reached at Rambouillet, France, which NATO wants Milosevic to sign, is a fraud, that there is nothing for him to sign. Mr. DioGuardi?
Well, the Albanians certainly didn't get their wish list at Rambouillet. They had to back off on many things, and they did it under great pressure from the United States of America. But what you've just heard is typical Serb propaganda, and they've been saying this for years. You know, we keep hearing that this is an ethnic conflict with religious overtones. What we really have to see here is what happened in 1989. The Albanians were the first to declare themselves for democracy from the former communist state of Yugoslavia. In 1989, 700,000 Albanians threw their Communist Party cards in the bonfire. And that's what started their problem with Slobodan Milosevic, because he's the last vestige of Stalinist communism in Europe. He controls everything. He controls the entire system in Belgrade, Yugoslavia, the press, the universities, the army. He fires people when he wants, and he controls the message. And he has programmed all of his officials with the same message. Look at the outrageous statement made yesterday by one of his officials when they asked about the refugees, and he said, well, that was one Albanian family taking a walk in the park when we saw the villages being torched and the kids and the people being executed. This is the kind of regime that has to be removed from Europe today. I congratulate President Clinton for the wonderful case he made. I'm a Republican, and I congratulate him for the wonderful case he made to the American people, and he's right. We have an interest there. We need a Europe that's united, free, and prosperous. That affects all of us.
The Pentagon is saying now that absolutely no consideration is given, or is being given, to sending in troops either from Canada or the United States.
Well, we already have a force in Macedonia. I can't believe that they're not considering right now to expand that force, that protection force made up now of U.S. troops and Norwegian troops. I believe it totals about 600. It seems to me that the only answer right now is to show resolve. We didn't show it for 2 years in Bosnia, and we lost 200,000 people, and we had a conflagration there second to none.
The ministers of the European Union are suggesting that further sanctions should be imposed in Belgrade. Is that going to work?
Sanctions don't seem to work with Mr. Milosevic. That's what the hearing was all about. We did get a very tough resolution. It was made even tougher because of the efforts of the Albanian American Civic League that represents the concerns of 400,000 ethnic Albanians here in America. But sanctions will not be enough. We need to show resolve. We should move an aircraft carrier off the coast of Montenegro. Let it stay there. We should ring Serbia with troops. Let them stay there. If we see one move, and don't forget, Ralph, 2 presidents drew a line in the sand. President Bush on the way out and President Clinton on the way in said if there's any military or paramilitary action in Kosovo, we would move swiftly. That question was put to Mr. Gelbard, Ambassador Gelbard, and he said that foreign policy declaration is still in effect. This is not a sovereign state as far as the Albanians are concerned. Kosovo is an independent state already. This has to be recognized.
But Congressman, you're supporting the idea. If we're going to bomb Kosovo and surrounding areas to end genocide, Why don't you make the case, and why wouldn't you be critical of the president if that is our stated goal and mission, that maybe we have to use military troops and ground forces if it would help? And why are we telegraphing all of this to our enemies anyway?
Well, there's no question. That's what this rally was all about. We had some 10,000 Albanian Americans today that were saying that we need to arm the KLA and that we should do that immediately. We did this to the Croatians in Bosnia. Why can't we do it to the KLA? Let them take out those surface-to-air missiles and the tanks, and then, yes, we got to get on with the next phase, which is to commit the ground troops.
People were killed in the meantime by the time they did it?
Yes, and that's going to happen in Kosovo.
That's why I want to know what you're suggesting now.
What we have to do right now is to enforce international law. We have war criminals in Belgrade. We're dealing with one right now. I said that article before. I have a copy of it right here. Here it is. It was in the Gannett papers on Sunday. There's Slobodan Milosevic, side by side Mr. Karadzic, who's now got a book coming out pointing the finger at him for all these atrocities in Bosnia. Why aren't we picking him up?
U podršci albanskom separatizmu i terorizmu na Kosovu i Metohiji posebno se angažovala albanska emigracija u zemljama Zapadne Europe i SAD. U Americi je 86. godine još osnovana Albansko-američka civilna liga pod predsjedništvom uticajnog kongresmena Josepha DioGuardija, čiji je zadatak bio da aktivno lobira na Capitol Hillu.
You have just heard former Serbian dictator and indicted war criminal Slobodan Milosevic misrepresent our important work in Washington to free Kosovo and all Albanians from the tyranny of his regime.
We have politicians running around using rhetoric like accountability, transparency. They throw these terms around, and they throw the terms around lockbox trust fund. People have taken them at their word. People have voted for them. There's been an exchange of political capital here, moral capital, not necessarily financial capital. And the title of Mr. Spacek's book, where he put all those speeches together, is Fairness. Fairness in accounting and in financial reporting. That's the key word. Are we being fair to the next generation and to other constituencies by not indicating what the real liability is because we've promised it? Is the United States going to be competitive? Is the United States going to win this global battle now that we're in a global economy so we don't become a hostage to China and Japan? And we are almost there with respect to the money that we borrowed, and I hope we continue to borrow, but somehow we've got to break that chain because it's not the right thing. If we want to be the leader of the free world, we cannot be a hostage to other nations. What you do is think about what made this country great to begin with. How did we overcome all these deficits? And how did we overcome this national debt without going under so far, although we're thinking that this could be a problem in the future? We are the most productive country in the world. We have a technology edge that put us there. And productivity offset all the waste that you've seen and many of these deficits. So who's to say in the future if we do the right things, and we need to report where we stand before we can do the right things? That's why your role is so important. Who's to say that two people cannot become three with technology? So the issue is not to look at just the size of the family, look at the potential of two people to become 3, 4, 5, and 6 if we are competitive and if we allow them the tools they need in order to produce, and produce in technological terms. Microsoft, Google, that's what's keeping this country ahead of the game.